Call this meeting to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Pursuant to NJSA 10:4, the Open Public Meetings Act, notice of this duly and regularly scheduled meeting of the Jackson Township Zoning Board of Adjustment has been published and posted in all appropriate locations.
Mr. Hyman?
Here.
Dr. Holfstein? Here. Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnas? Here. Ms. Rosal?
Here.
Mr. Stafford Smith?
Here.
Ms. Bradley?
Here. Do we have any resolutions this evening? Are you starting or is Liz starting?
Yes. Resolution number, so yes, we do have resolution, we have several. Resolution number 2024-32, resolution of appointments to the Board of Adjustment for the Township of Jackson for the period of July 1st, 2024 to June 30th, 2025.
Eligible to vote is everyone here.
I never received any copies of the resolutions.
Do we want to,
You don't get emails.
Correct. Well, they supposedly told me they set me up, but I haven't received any.
all right, so maybe the solution to this is we'll table the resolutions until the next meeting?
The board's call.
Okay. Is that acceptable to everyone?
Just for the record, we have resolution 2024-32 through 2024-38 pending for this evening.
I make a motion to table all of this evening's resolutions until our next meeting when we have an opportunity to read them.
I'll second that.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Holfstein?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak?
Yes.
Ms. Parnas? Yes. Ms. Rosal? Yes. Mr. Stafford Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes. Okay. Do we have any minutes this evening, Liz?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. All right. I have a voucher in front of me from the Township of Jackson for the recording secretary for this evening's meeting in the amount of $175. I need a motion and a second to pay the invoice.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Holfstein?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak?
Yes.
Ms. Parnas? Yes. Ms. Rosal? Yes. Mr. Stafford Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes. Do we have any announcements this evening, Mr. Murphy?
We have two announcements this evening. Application number 1 on this evening's agenda is Real Birnbaum, use variance 3490, block 14001, lot 9. That application is being carried to the,
Oh, sorry, here. November 2024.
yes, what's the meeting date that it's on? To the first meeting in November of 2024. Do you have the date for that? November 6th, 2024. Number 1 is being carried to November 6th, 2024. No additional notice will be required. The applicant has waived time. The second application, which is Rosenblum variance 3464, block 13301, lot 19, is being carried to the September 18th, 2024 meeting of the Jackson Township Zoning Board of Adjustment, and no additional notice will be required. That leaves application number 3 as the only application on this evening's agenda.
We have one correction. The first item on the agenda is being carried to December 4th. That's Ms. Jennings' application.
Okay, so let me re-announce that. The Israel Birnbaum application, which is number 1, block 14001, lot 9, that is being carried to the December 4th, 2024 meeting of the Jackson Township Zoning Board of Adjustment. No additional notice will be required. The applicant has waived time. Sure. Mhm.
Carry for this long until December? Or what about the existing conditions and what's going on there now?
What about it?
Well, shouldn't it stop
Not necessarily.
so they can continue to use it as their,
That's correct.
aren't there all kinds of violations going on there?
Can't speak to that. I don't have personal knowledge. I would presume that they've been violated, but I don't know for sure.
Perhaps. I mean, this is a safety issue that I'm referring to. We don't know whether this has been inspected by the fire department, whether there's exits properly marked. There's a host of issues.
Mr. Hudak, the best that I can do is offer to speak to code enforcement about that particular issue. Other than that, I can't do anything about it. The best that I can do is offer to speak to code enforcement about that particular issue. But there's nothing that I can personally do about it at the moment.
Yes, I understand that. Shouldn't we, though?
If that's what you're directing me to do, I'm happy to do so. Very good. I'll reach out tomorrow.
Through the chair, continuing on that, is there any way to get any up-to-date information from the applicant as to whether they had the fire inspections and any of the outside agency reports? Because basically, everything we have is just months old.
As I stated, Dr. Hofstein, I'm happy to reach out to code enforcement tomorrow. I don't have that information on hand today. Certainly, I can reach out to the applicant's counsel and find out if she has any additional information either as to that particular issue.
Okay.
So I'll be happy to report back at the next meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Murphy, we need to swear in our professionals.
Gentlemen, thank you for raising your hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments that you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. If you'd each please state your name and your positions with the board.
Evan Hill, Board Engineer.
Ernie Peters, Board Planner.
Jeffrey Paporo, zoning officer.
Thank you.
No executive session this evening, correct?
That's correct.
Any matters of discussion?
None that I'm aware of.
Administrative approvals?
No.
All right, then we're going to move on to our application for this evening, which is application number 3, A&A, Truck Parts, Inc., Block 2508, Lot 6 and 7, preliminary and final site plan 910 with use variance 3494. Mr. Pfeffer?
Good evening. Just one housekeeping item, I just want to double check. Ryan, I believe all 7 members were here last time. I just want to make sure.
That's not correct. Ms. Rosales is new, but she has certified.
Perfect, then housekeeping is done, and
Very
we
good.
can proceed. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I was going to save us, otherwise we got to do some more testimony, but hoping to save some time. Good evening, everybody. Adam Pfeffer, attorney on behalf of the applicant, A&A Truck Parts, Inc. As almost everybody on the board may recall, we were before the board back in April, at the April meeting. The applicant is seeking to utilize the site as a truck and contractor parking and storage facility. there are some improvements and uses that we are proposing. At the April meeting, the board had some good questions, they had some concerns. So based upon that, we tabled the matter. Mr. Borden, who'll be here in a minute, he'll step up in a minute, be sworn in, will walk us through what those changes are. I'll give you a quick overview just to recap what we're proposing, what the changes are, and then we can proceed with any questions or concerns. At this time, if I can, swear in Mr. Borden, and then we will go from there.
Good evening, Mr. Borden. Thank you for raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments that you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. If you'd please state your name, provide your affiliation and your credentials.
Certainly. Ian Borden, President of Professional Design Services, Lakewood, New Jersey. I'm a professional planner licensed in the state of New Jersey. Graduate of Rutgers 42 years ago, and I've worked in the field since then.
You've been before us plenty of times. This board will accept your credentials.
Thank you.
And you're
Thank you.
not old enough to have been out 42 years. Come on.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It kind of feels weird to say it.
Ian, for the ease of the board's use, if you can just give a quick recap as to what we're proposing,
Yes.
and then what the modified changes are that we've had since the April meeting.
Yes, Anthony, if you don't mind pulling up Exhibit A1. But the site is 7.8 acres located on West Commodore Boulevard, between Diamond Road and Right to Bow Road. It's on the south side, marked in yellow. The site is in the LC zone, and we are seeking a D1 variance to construct the contractor parking and storage facility. We are proposing, there is a, recall in the southern part of the site, which is the bottom of A1, there is a riparian buffer that we're not allowed to disturb. So we're disturbing basically the half of the property that fronts along Commodore, and we're seeking a single driveway to Commodore, which lines up with the driveway of a warehouse that's been constructed across the street. In fact, you can see the across the street, we have a pavement parking and storage area. We are proposing an office structure along the front setback of 400 square feet with a couple of parking spaces. We don't expect to have any full-time employees, but the office is for just administrative matters, light office work if needed. The site would be fenced with an 8-foot chain link fence. We had received comments, as Mr. Pfeffer noted, comments from the board at the last hearing, both from the board and the members of the public, particularly the neighbor next door to our west. We do adjoin a residential zone to our west. We are providing a 50-foot buffer along the west, and we also abut residential zone to the south. Of course, we're not developing the bottom half of the site, basically from site down on that exhibit. But we provide a 50-foot buffer along the western and southern boundaries, where the ordinance requires a 10-foot buffer, because we only have a 400 square foot office, and buffer is based upon the size of a building. But we know that we're a use variance. We know we have enhanced proofs. We're seeking to be a good neighbor. A&A has been a good neighbor in this town. There's other projects they've done in town along Bismarck and Progress Place. The one in Bismarck has been operating for a number of years now, and you never hear about it because they're good at what they do, and they're a very nice family-owned company. But so we provided a 50-foot buffer along the western side, and if I could, if you don't mind going to Exhibit A, the next to last one, which numbers escape me, A5. Yeah, that's the landscape exhibit that we had presented last time, and that remains unchanged. So what we had done as a result of the meeting last week, and there are a couple changes that reflect in the operations of the site that don't reflect on the plans, but just to make sure we're all on the same page again tonight, there were comments made. We had provided a very detailed statement of operations. There were two particular items that we were asked to change. One is in the statement, the sentence said that we typically, Typically, the hours are from 8 a.m. or 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. I forget the dates now, the times now. From 6 a.m. till 6 p.m. Monday through Saturday. But we had the word typically in there, and we were asked to remove that. So the hours are firm. They're 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Secondly, the next sentence of the statement had talked about the fact that a truck or trailer might be dropped off at any time. We are dealing with contractors, particularly over-the-road truck drivers, because that's one of the tenants would be somebody who has an over-the-road truck that can't park it at their house because of code in residential zones. So this is a place where they could rent an area and park it. But they might be coming home at odd hours. So we had been asked, and we have agreed to change the statement that they only, after 6 p.m., only drop off. In other words, no picking up or no egress, if you will, after 6 p.m. until 6 the next morning. But otherwise, on the site plan, what we had done was, just summarize them quickly, we had proposed a pavement milling surface. You can see in Exhibit A5, the storage area. We had changed that from pavement millings to pavement. We did add, we only had curb proposed along the front of it, adjoining Commodore, on the interior edge of the parking. We were asked, and we did provide curb around the entire perimeter. We did provide curb and sidewalk along Commodore. We did add parking and storage details. We did show an interior, now that we have pavement, we can stripe it. So we have an interior circular driveway, and that defines generally the areas where parking and storage would occur. We did add a note, speaking now really to the neighbor and the western side. We did add a note, there was a comment made that could we maybe not park trucks along the western side, because those are the items that move more frequently, and we added a note that we originally had, and we still propose parking primarily of those types of trucks along the road, but we added a note that they shouldn't be parked on the west. They can park anywhere else, but not along the western side of the property. Equipment, storage, contractor equipment, trailers, and whatnot can be stored there, but not the trucks that necessarily move all the time. We were asked, and we did provide an earthen berm in that 50-foot buffer, so we have a 4-foot high berm that we're proposing. Recall that we have a double row of evergreen trees, as well as a single row of deciduous trees, as well as another row of shrubs. So we have a 4-season screen that we're proposing there. We were asked to look at the species of that evergreen trees, and we did change it to my landscape architect in my office found something that I'd never seen, but it's a great tree. It's a Serbian pine. The idea being that it's more of a columnar tree that doesn't lose any lower branches. So we've done that. And we've added the 8-foot chain link fence that surrounds the site. We've agreed to make that a solid fence adjoining the western side of the property as well. So we've truly worked very hard to satisfy the comments that we received from the board, but also from the neighbor, to increase or provide the 4-foot berm, look at the species of the trees, and add the solid fence, and enjoin the site from parking the trucks on that side of the road. And that summarizes the work that we did.
Any questions for Mr. Borden? Microphone, please.
Well, I think Mr. Purpero has better knowledge than I, but my understanding is the noise ordinance relates to construction work. If we were a project site, but we're not. So as far as any business moving, leaving the job, leaving their property to go out and work elsewhere. To my knowledge, there's no restriction on that, on the noise ordinance. And I appreciate the question. I do appreciate the question.
And just to be clear, again, we're in a limited commercial zone, but we will be complying with any and all ordinances with regard to that. We understand, and like Mr. Bourne indicated, the applicant is a operator already of a very similar site, and then Mr. Bourne indicated, we are of no knowledge of any violations or any complaints for those sites because they operate it well. And we have added all this buffering and the setbacks to make sure that we're not making any excess noise.
Mr. Hudak, if I could clarify, the noise ordinance pertains to really any, not just site development activities as like construction, but also operations of the site as well. So there is an ordinance in place. The noise ordinance talks about maximum decibel levels at the property line. Typically, moving equipment around does not rise to the level of violating that ordinance. However, they would be obligated to meet that ordinance on a day-to-day basis. So if there's any complaints from the neighbors, code enforcement will go out there, check it out. We do have, I believe we have noise meters, correct? Yep. So, they're well prepared to address those types of complaints. But just to be clear, it's not specific to construction vehicles. It's also for operations of a site as well.
Madam Chair?
Correct. Well, what you perceive as noise isn't necessarily violating the ordinance, though. But if there's a complaint, the town has equipment and the manpower to go out there and measure the noise, and then if there's issues, it's a co-compliant thing.
Madam Chair, to Mr. Hudak's point, I want to remind the board that this isn't a site plan first and then a use variance. It's a use variance first with a site plan component. So to the extent that you reconcile what they're proposing with generally what's permitted, which is professional offices, medical offices, they might have different hours of operations. I think the applicant has tried to put those safeguards in place that I think Mr. Hudak is looking for to make sure that they're not an egregious imposition on existing neighbors. This is sort of a unique site. Across the street as you head north is sort of more heavy equipment operated types of uses, and to the south is residential and the west. But to the extent that they provide us with those safeguards to ameliorate the concerns as almost, and I don't want to testify for Mr. Borden, almost as a transitional zone between what's across the street and what exists on the south side of the road, I think they've gone a long way to putting those safeguards in place. But certainly, as we're sort of crafting a site plan resolution here, let's just remember that this is a use variance first. And to the extent that the hours of operation that Mr. Borden spoke about are not inconsistent with construction sites. That's the hours of operation that the garbage men get on the road, or you would normally see construction sites get started up. Normally, they're not supposed to start until 7, but generally speaking, folks are on the road at 6 a.m. So I want you to consider making sure that we have those safeguards in place so that we're not leaving the residents to fend for themselves should someone decide not to be a good neighbor.
Any other questions, Mr. Borden? Excuse me.
I have a question just to follow up on that. I think Mr. Hudak mentioned, the ordinance, but I think the spirit of the question was really more in line with what Mr. Peters was saying about, what about the neighbors? He mentioned that there's residents on two sides. I think the residents toward the back are so far that, I imagine any noise would be swallowed by that. It's a very long way with all the riparian buffer and the stormwater management.
About 400 feet.
I guess I'm curious to hear what Mr. Hill, what you would say. I really think the applicant did a great job addressing everything, or most of the things that I recall bringing up. Everything is just, looks like we just checked off the whole list. I would just be curious to hear, the trees should buffer the noise, the solid fence should buffer the noise, the distance. should also buffer noise, and the fact that they're not going to be parking trucks toward the side that has adjoining R3 zone property line. I'm curious, outside, and, I'm not a noise expert, I don't think you are either, and surely we haven't done any studies, I'm not looking for that specifically. I'm curious, from like a reasonableness kind of perspective, what are your thoughts on, what will travel toward the neighbors on the adjoining property line?
So I'm not a noise expert, but I've heard a lot of noise expert testimony, and I've actually, in prior years, performed noise calculations consistent with the way an acoustical engineer would. Noise levels decrease exponentially with distance, okay? And the distance would be where that noise is being generated from. The noise ordinance requires a maximum of 65 decibels at the property line. 65 decibels is equivalent to that of a residential air conditioner compressor or condensing unit if you're standing about 5 feet away from it. Okay? That is what you would expect and what is regulated at the property line. An air conditioner
Pretty
unit.
reasonable.
Right? Very reasonable. You can have a
We have that in
conversation.
residential neighborhoods.
You
We
have
don't
it in
like
your
but
backyard.
It's near our deck.
Some
but
people
it
have
is.
multiple units in their backyard. So the fact that is the approximate, we say 65 decibels, but what is it? That's about what that is. It's an air conditioner unit. And that's at the property line. But between the property line and the site, between the common property line where the residence is, adjacent residence, and the site, is now a proposed 6-foot-tall solid fence.
Right.
Well, solid fences have an effect on mitigating noise. They don't drown it out completely, but they have an effect at mitigating it. That's why the Department of Transportation uses sound walls along highways, right? It absorbs the sound, it reflects the sound. In addition to trees or evergreen trees, that has an effect also of dampening noise, just like it does dampening radio signals of any type, or radio signals, communication, general, right? Noise operates the same way. So those are common ways to mitigate noise, not eliminate it, but mitigate it. But I'm going to go back to the fact that the site has to be operated in accordance with the township's noise ordinance, just like any site in Jackson does. And if it's perceived that the noise is excessive, then code enforcement should be notified. They'll measure the values, and if they exceed what the ordinance requires, then there'll be additional mitigation efforts. It could be just regulating the hours of operation further, or putting more trees in, or whatever the case is. But we have an ordinance in place to address noise.
Thank you, that clarifies it. I guess hearing that the 65 decibel, to me, that, I don't know what that means, but if you're saying, the way you described it, it seems like that really is sufficient to protect the neighbors. Thank you.
Mr. Hudak?
No, it's always been 6
It was
a.m.
always 6 a.m.
Yes, it was
Yes.
always 6 a.m.
There was no, I'm sorry, the word was typically 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., and the board had some concerns. Well, typically, does that mean it's 5 a.m. on Monday? So we just revised it to confirm, we're taking out the 6 a.m. And again, as far as pushing it
Well,
later.
we removed typically.
Typically.
You had raised that question. Is typically mean almost 6 a.m.? And I said, it's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Remove typically. Well, if the noise ordinance regulates noise at 7 a.m., and that would be on site, so we have people come into this site to take their equipment and go somewhere else to work. If they have to leave our site at 7 a.m., they're already starting work wherever they're going to late. I think that's unfair to the people that are trying to earn an honest living. I
Mr.
think it's-
Hudak?
And we're only talking about vehicles. And I would add that, and Evan did a great job, but I would also add that the noise from vehicles, and this is in the low 50s. If you've, my EISs that don't apply in this job, but this board and the planning board has seen many of them, one of the components that we look at is noise. And noise in this area, in this scenario, is driven by traffic, by the traffic on Commodore, or 195, which is to the north of us. But typically, highway or road traffic dominates noise in this town or this area, absent any industrial noise source, which we do not have. And that is typically in the 54 to 56 range, which, again, exponentially is significantly less than 65.
Mr. Peters? I know you want to make a comment. Can I just ask you a question first? I know this is the LC zone. What other types of businesses would be allowed? I guess what I'm looking for is what would be the difference between what they're proposing and what would normally be allowed in this zone as far as traffic at something at 6 o'clock in the morning?
I think this ends up being a little bit of a debate, and I'd like to at least give the applicant an opportunity to respond as well. So in the LC, the limited commercial zone, medical offices, professional offices, continuing care facilities, assisted living facilities, rehab facilities, and in standalone facilities, daycare, preschool, adult daycare, churches, mini storage, funeral homes, art galleries, libraries, museums. In fairness to the conversation, if you go get a colonoscopy nowadays, you go to a surgery center, you're supposed to be there at 6 a.m., which means the employees are getting there before 6 a.m. But I don't know the start hours of daycare anymore, thank goodness. But I think they're
6
before
a.m.
7 a.m. But what I would like to perhaps just ask a question of the applicant, do we know the method? Is there a control for the, and I'll call them tenants because they're different folks, it's not A&A. What's the control? How does someone get into the site? They just drive in, or is there a keypad?
Thank you, Ernie. That was testimony from April, but the site is fenced with a gate. It includes a gate across the main entrance. That gate is controlled by a keypad that only the tenants have access to.
So I guess my point
Or the emergency services.
So I guess my point is given the technology we have, if we had a resident concern, could we verify that
Yes.
Ian and Ernie's trucking company shows up at 5:45 every morning, and then Mr. Purpura or code enforcement goes to A&A, and A&A comes to us and says, stop showing up at 5:45?
Yes.
Is there some way to include in the entrance-exit security setup something that would keep track of the time that people are coming in and leaving so that they can be utilized both by the owner, applicant, tenants, and municipality to ensure compliance?
Yes.
Thank you.
And to your question, Ms. Bradley, in our presentation in April, we had offered with our traffic, that was primarily the reason for it. Recall, Exhibit A4 was what could we build on the site as a conforming use? And we just picked one, which was professional office. And that generated a two-story office, 56,800 square feet with 284 parking spaces. That would be permitted 25 feet from that property line with the commercial air conditioner, with the refuse enclosure,
Garbage trucks.
with a
come in.
garbage truck that could come in at 5 a.m.
Just to respond to Mr. Peters' examples that he gave, I don't think the nurses and those people getting colonoscopies are driving tractor trailers. Or dump trucks. Or dump trucks, and that's what we agree with. So, you talk about flying people earning an honest living, you have fine people who are living near this facility also.
I understand, but
Being a good neighbor is key.
I understand, but my point is as well, and that was my point about why I extended into the noise a little bit, you've got traffic on Commodore Boulevard 24/7 of trucks that are making more noise than our trucks would make starting and driving off the property.
Also, one other question, Mr. Borden. So we've moved that there's no truck parking along the residential side of the R3 zone,
Yes.
that's correct? And we have a 50-foot buffer with a solid fence, correct?
Yes.
All right. The next house, the closest house over, do they have a fence on their, I'm looking at the site plan, it looks
Right.
like they have a fence on their property
I
as well.
don't know if they do or don't.
Okay, but approximately how many feet from the property line if
Right.
you had a?
They're probably 50 feet off their property line.
So even without any of the buffering, is 100 feet at a minimum before, and there's no truck parking in that 50 feet buffer?
And the house is, if you go to A1, Anthony, the house on the adjoining property is very close to Commodore. The house is right up in this area.
So
That's the
again,
house.
the only reason I'm pointing this out, just to make sure, it's not just that we're 50 feet off. We're a 50-feet buffer with no parking on that side for any trucks in that area, along with that the other side has its own setbacks as well. So we're not that we're right up parking. I
see
think
the
we've been
house.
trying to be the good neighbor and accommodate as much as feasible.
Through the chair.
Yes.
Can you clarify on A4? I see that there's proposed 3-story office building, 58,000 square feet.
Well,
Is that a
that's the
mistake?
alternate plan that I had mentioned. That's not what we're building, that's what we said. Again, in the use variance, we're trying to prove purposes of zoning and enhanced proofs, and no negative impact on the zone plan and master plan. And all that testimony I gave in April, and this is an alternate plan, the what if. If this plan was not developed, what could be developed in accordance with the ordinance?
Okay, so you're saying
And in
that's
my
not what you're
opinion-
proposing?
We're not proposing that, and in my opinion, and John Ray provided traffic testimony in April, certainly the traffic impact, the light, air, and open space, the building coverage is much higher with a permitted use than we're proposing with a use that requires a D1 variance.
Could you elaborate a little bit on the office use that you will be having? I know you spoke about it, in the last meeting. What exactly is that? What's the?
Well, just looking at the size of the property and the code, meaning the maximum impervious.
I believe, I think the question
I
was
mean,
with regard to the office space that we have on site, the
Oh.
400 square feet, or whatever the square footage is. I believe, again, if I'm correct, that's just a site operator or someone on site
sorry.
to do any paperwork, any
Thank you.
management, security, that's all it's for. It's probably no more than one, max by 2 people in that office, and those are going to be operators of the site.
I misunderstood the question. Thank you for that, Adam. Yes.
No, that's fine. Now, could you speak to the nature of that trailer? Is it temporary? Is it permanent?
Well, we call it a trailer, but in fact, I would consider it a pre-manufactured office. It's not, it's going to be indistinct visually from a stick-built office building. It's just a 10-foot by 40-foot office, as Adam said, to accommodate 1 or possibly 2 people, not full-time, but maybe when they're meeting with a potential tenant to sign a lease or whatever it might be. And it's just a few parking spaces, that's all it is.
And it's not for rental.
It's not for rental.
We're not renting
No,
that,
my question really is, I mentioned it last time, and this time I got a little bit more clarification as far as the ordinance. There is an ordinance that doesn't allow permanent office buildings, permanent office trailers. So I just want to know if that's, you're applying for.
No,
variance
we're
for
not
that?
applying for that. To that extent, we would, for purposes of, we just call it a pre-manufactured office building. I mean, pre-manufactured is just a style of construction. It's just a 400-square-foot office, single story,
So it's not,
not on wheels.
Can I ask? Okay. It's not a trailer.
No.
It's an actual.
It will not be a trailer.
Prefabricated
Yes.
building?
building,
Yes.
correct.
Okay. Is there a foundation associated
Yes,
with
there will be a
it?
foundation.
So it's not movable?
Correct.
Whether or not
It's
on
not meant to be
wheels.
movable.
Wonderful. That satisfies
It was a
me.
bad choice of words. I should have put pre-manufactured, not the T word.
So that satisfies me to the extent that that would not fit the definition of trailer as
No.
defined in the ordinance.
Not at all.
thank you.
Thank you.
for clarifying. Okay, now, another thing is, I know that you guys changed it from the gravel to pavement. In my opinion, I think that would be better for the noise. It's not as bumpy, and the tractor trailers going in and out, I think it's actually a benefit. That was just to the point of Mr. Hudak with the noise. I do think that it is a benefit to have the pavement. Now, our engineer, I was discussing with him earlier, I would just ask if in the front, where you have the 8-foot fence that you're proposing, I see that it's going to be a solid fence.
Along the western boundary, it's solid.
Right, so now, by West Commodore,
It's an open fence.
it's an open fence. Okay, now, regardless, would you be willing to have the vegetation, meaning move the, what is it, the stormwater, or its reserves in the front? I just lost it now. Here, it's marked as SS1 and number 1 and number 2, all the way in the front on A5.
Yes,
So that's going to have vegetation around that, right?
that's correct.
So would you be willing to move that back further into the property and that way the vegetation will be blocking more of the fence?
I would not prefer to move the stormwater back. We do propose a hedge-type land. I think the key of any landscaping, and this is the same for this as any shopping center, say, or any site that has parking, is what you're trying to do is shield the headlights and the vehicles. And in that event, we do propose shrub planting along the curb line that will do that. So I believe that is the landscaping that we're doing with the basins, with that type of planting, will accommodate and we could also make the fence, if you desire, a solid fence. What my client likes to do, and what he did on Bismarck, is he uses a chain link fence and he has the slats in there.
To make it solid?
That will be fine. Yeah, that's what they like to do, with the green slats in there, or
Okay.
black.
Thank you.
Any additional questions, Mr. Borden?
So my question is, in the evenings, when you have lighting, and I know one of the concerns from the last meeting was the spotlights facing, or disturbing the...
Yes.
Is that going to be addressed?
That's a great question. We do not propose lighting of the entire site. So we are not lighting this parking area. The only light that we have is, if you go to A5 again, Anthony, please. And kind of slide over to the entrance. That zoom is good. Yeah, that's perfect right there, yes. Yeah, perfect, thank you. The only light we have is right in this entry area for safety. There's no lighting in the back and side portion of the parking. We purposely did that, not to have lighting effects on the neighbors.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Stafford Smith?
Yes, on A4, we show the entrance off Congress. Is there any provisions that should two vehicles show up, you wouldn't be stacking in the roadway?
We tried to consider that, Mr. Stafford Smith. We set the fence back 100 feet, I believe it is, off the road. The gate is quite far back. Two full tractor trailers, but in reality, mostly what's being parked here are the trucks without the trailers, generally.
The people who are coming at 6 a.m. are coming with their personal, usually to drop, being dropped off, so it's not the rigs then leaving.
But we purposely create that throat that's 100 feet deep for that reason.
Any additional questions for Mr. Borden? Mr. Pfeffer?
That's really all our testimony. I don't know if the professionals had any questions or if there are any comments from the public.
Mr. Peters, Mr. Hill, any questions, comments? Okay. Any additional questions before I open it to the public? Being that there's no additional questions from the board members, I'm going to open this to the public. Anybody wishing to come forward to discuss what was testified to tonight, please do so at this time. Come to the microphone, please.
Good evening. If you would please,
First of all, I apologize in advance.
Ma'am, if you would please raise your right hand.
Liesl Tracy.
please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments
I
they-
do.
that you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
If you would please state your name, spell your last, and provide your address.
Liesl Tracy, 361 West Commodore Boulevard, Jackson, New Jersey.
Can you just spell your last name for the record, please?
Treacy.
Thank you.
And I apologize in advance. I have a hearing problem. I didn't have time to go home and get my hearing aid. So if you could yell into your microphones, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm going to ask you to yell as well. You know it's hard to hear up here, so if you could speak
Am I
as
good?
loudly as
Is it
possible.
okay now?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Now that you know how to spell my name again. A&A Trucks is seeking a site plan with use variance for fleet parking and equipment and container storage in a light commercial zone, for which it is not allowed, according to your code book. Section 244-3 in the code says, intent purpose specifically says, quote, to encourage municipal action to guide the appropriate and orderly development of land in a manner which we will promote the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the people, of which there are over 1,000 on the 3-mile strip of West Commodore Boulevard. First question, did A&A Truck do a survey and put markers to identify the property line?
Yes.
Can you
We-
describe the markers?
Uh,
Because I looked for them and couldn't find them.
My office performed a boundary survey. I can't tell you, typically, a marker is an iron pin that would be very hard to find. It's only about 1.5 inches in diameter, and normally they're placed under the ground slightly. The
Okay.
whole point is not to have people disturb them. Not saying you would, I know you wouldn't, but they're not easy to find.
Okay,
But it
well,
was surveyed.
I would like to find them because this might seem silly to you, but there are a lot of dead trees in the tree line. And I was going to have a tree taken down that's very dead and going to fall on my cars, but I think it's on your property.
I understand.
So
No,
I would
we-
like to find those markers so we can identify which trees are yours and which
Well,
trees are
we
mine.
could certainly agree to do that as part of any condition, that the line would be clearly marked. And we could identify the trees along the line.
Could you speak up?
We could do that, we would agree to do that as a condition of any approval, that we would clearly demarcate the boundary line and mark the trees as to their relationship to the property line.
Okay. So if I call you up and say, is this your tree, you can tell me?
I could.
Okay. That was question one. The hours of operation need to be clearly defined and not allow for the smudging, smearing, and fudging of the clarity of those hours of operation in an attempt to allow a 24/7 operation. It is not approved for a light commercial zone. Number 3, fence and water flow. Had you done the appropriate site plan, there must be a minimum of 6 inches clear under the solid fence in order for water flow currently occurring towards the low area in the rear, which was on one of your, maybe you could show it to the people again.
Yes, if you don't mind, Anthony, go to A1.
The water runs west to east across the rear of all the neighboring properties and goes through the woods line and ends up in that Where's the one that shows the green?
I think this is probably the better one. If you don't mind, I could answer that, if you don't mind, and clarify that, if you don't mind. What she's describing is, recall the back of the property we're not developing because it's in a riparian buffer.
Could you show the bigger picture that shows the big area that's?
Sure, if you go to A3, please, Anthony, I think it's A3. The color one.
All right, you can see how large it is.
Which one is that,
And
Ann?
I am directly to the west.
A2, I'm sorry, Anthony.
So, thank you.
Right, so the green area is that riparian buffer that I was describing that we're not developing. And what she is describing is, what you have here is there's wetlands on the neighboring property. The neighboring property to our east is a warehouse building that was approved by the planning board and
We don't
completed.
need to talk about the warehouse.
Okay, well, I'm just trying to give reference, that's all.
I just want to know
And
the
that
west to east.
natural
You
drainage
answering the
system,
question.
headwater is up in this area and runs from west to east.
Correct.
So that natural drainage system is unaffected by our project because we're not constructing on the southern part of our project.
Well, actually, it will, because where your tree line ends, on the west side, the water runs about 25 feet to the right.
That double line there is the natural drainage
No,
system,
The tree line
Right there.
bordering my property,
here.
yeah. Go 3 trees to the right.
Up in this area,
There's a stream that runs to that spot.
right?
Yep,
Yeah, our topography shows that being in this area.
Yes,
We've
sir.
done a topographic survey as part of the site plan.
you can visit anytime and I'll show you.
The point is, I think the point that's being made, if you don't mind me, is that what the concern is that our development can't disturb that natural drainage system. I agree with that. We cannot disturb that natural drainage
Right.
system, and we are not
Because what would
disturbing that.
happen is it would allow for flooding of at least 3
No,
properties.
no question. I agree 150%.
Thank you.
But we are not disturbing that, and our topography and site grading indicates that.
And it also needs to be taken in consideration, melting snow does the same thing,
I understand.
not just rain. Okay, number 4, the lighting we discussed earlier must be appropriate and not face west.
As I said.
Or south,
I
because you'll
understand.
get
The
slattery south.
the only lights we have is in the area of this gray.
Okay, and how does it point down?
It points directly downward.
Okay. The noise control will adhere to all regulations as to not violate any ordinance currently in place, and as not to annoy, disturb, or cause adverse reactions, and inappropriately cause health, safety, and welfare issues to the people surrounding the boulevard. And I might add, that is a 3-mile stretch. We're not just talking about my house. We're talking about 3 miles, half a mile, 1.5 miles to 527, and 1.5 miles to 571. All those people are going to be affected by whatever this business is. Okay, secondly, leasing space to fleet of trucks is not allowed in LC zone and would clearly cause serious issues with the well-being of the West Commodore residents and travelers, including noise, traffic flow, safety, bottleneck at 527 and 571, as well as legal rental issues, as the decibels can range from 85 to well over 100 for a truck. And I used to drive one, so I can verify that. Number 3, this type of business belongs in a highway commercial zone. And as this is mostly residential properties, approximately 100 homeowners, assuming 2 people minimum per home, and Jackson Gardens, which is 500 units, assuming 2 people minimum per home. That's a lot of people you're going to impact. The variance would violate all code and well-being and safety of neighbors. That's all I have. Any questions?
I just want to address a couple of points, and if Mr. Borden or Mr. Pfeffer feels the need to correct me if I didn't take good notes. I think we addressed the lighting. I think Mr. Borden stated the lighting was only going to be up front near the gate.
I'm sorry, could you yell into your microphone?
Sorry, is that better?
Sorry.
So Mr. Borden addressed the lighting. It was only going to be up front near the gate, so it wouldn't be facing your property or the other properties, and the light would be facing down. Am
Not
I
a
correct?
problem.
Okay. As far as the buffer, I think that they've done a great job in changing the fence on that side and including the additional type of trees and everything to help minimize, the noise impact. As far as the water, I can only speak to the topography that we're being shown and have to, take Mr. Borden at his word that that's not going to affect. As far as the noise, I understand your concern. I just have a question. I've been in Jackson a long time. School buses, things like that. I can only imagine you've got plenty going up and down every morning, right?
I'm sorry, what?
School buses, I'm sure you have a lot of traffic coming up and down every morning,
Yes.
right?
Hundreds of vehicles, and the thing is that I don't know if a traffic study was redone, but nobody bothered to count how many cars are cross either north, south, east, or west, both 527 and 71, because that's where your bottlenecks are going to be. Did anybody count that?
John Ray had done a McDonough Ray had done a traffic study, and he provided testimony at the April meeting.
So I just wanted to address a couple of the points that you had made up, but thank you so much for coming forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Pfeffer, would you like to make a closing statement?
Yeah, just real quick, I want to just retouch on a couple of
Oh, I'm
items.
sorry. Oh, Mr. Pfeffer, forgive me. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't realize you were going to come forward. Forgive me. I'm sorry.
Not a problem.
And I think the public,
Sorry about that.
that's okay, that's okay. I'm ready.
Thank you for raising your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments that you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir, I do.
If you would please state your name,
Carlos Martins, Martins,
provide your address, please.
406 Cobain Road.
Thank you, Mr. Burns. Always nice to see you.
Okay, thank you. Just a few quick questions on the usage.
Just speak into the mic for me.
Yep.
Sorry.
So, based on the experience, when are the most busiest hours? I would think from 6 to 7 is when everybody's leaving, right? Is that true, or am I
For the contractors, I would say I would agree with that, yes.
6 to 7?
Well, 6 to 8, yeah.
Okay, 6 to 8.
Yeah.
So I understand it's open from 6 to 4, but that's the busy time, right?
Yes, I have a landscape contractor that leases residential property next to my house.
Right.
And every morning, I leave for work at 8 o'clock, and every morning, they leave at exactly the same time, because they're always right in front of me on the road.
Right. And then how many, I might have missed it, so how many trucks, so after 6 p.m., say you're full, you're doing great business, how many trucks would be there? I mean, how many?
How many trucks,
Yeah.
I couldn't guess.
20?
Because we're dealing with a
50?
variant, we're talking about different, we're talking about over-the-road trucks, we're talking about trucks that are pickup size, where trailers, equipment, containers, there's,
Right,
you
okay.
know, much of the stuff, much of the equipment and storage wouldn't move on a daily basis. Not everything moves on a daily basis.
Right.
And if an over-the-road trucker is a tenant, they might be gone for 4 or 5 days of a week.
Right.
You know, so,
Okay. Where I'm kind of going with all that is, so let's say the busy time is from 6 to 8, right? So if you're measuring how much noise is happening, it's not just one truck, right? You have to measure during that period of time, how many trucks are moving, whether it's in the building, right, or even out on the roadways, especially if you got school buses coming along and all this other stuff, right? I think that's a consideration. And most of these are diesel trucks, right? Is there an air pollution issue or anything like that with having 10, 20 trucks at one time starting up and, no?
No.
Okay, I wasn't sure.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have a turnpike.
Yeah, right,
Uh,
right.
no,
Okay,
well-
I know that they're forced to put something in.
They would
the-
all comply with motor vehicle
Right,
regulations.
so air pollution is not an issue. It's really all about the noise and how many trucks you have at one time, say within a 2-hour span, you know, moving around. I know I hear it when they're on the street and they rev up, right? You hear some, you know, when they rev up. If they're just moving slowly, not a big deal. But when they rev up is when you hear a lot of noise. And if you're a neighbor and you're on that street, it could be, you know, anyway, something to consider. I just wanted, I think the point was the concentration of when all this is moving around. It's in a 2-hour span. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Mr. Pfeffer, I
Thank you.
apologize.
No problem.
I'm sorry.
So yeah, so just
Could
real.
I cut you off one more time? I'm sorry.
Wait, hold on one second. Anyone else wishing to, before I make the same mistake, anyone else wishing to come forward, please do so at this time. Not seeing anyone else come forward, I'm going to close public session at this time.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
I missed this before because I was looking at the wrong site plan. Is there a reason you're not extending the solid fence to the, maybe it's the south side, the other, it's just a small stretch that also faces the R3 zone?
No, I actually should have, so we would do that.
Okay, thank you.
For clarification, did you also agree to extend it along the frontage?
Slat, with slats.
So chain link with slats?
Chain link with slats on the frontage.
Just trying to keep my notes.
Yep.
Yeah. 8 foot, right? Yeah. 8 foot around the entire complex.
Okay, Mr. Pfeffer.
I'm afraid to speak.
You see, he hesitated. He was
So
waiting for it.
real quick, again, so I do agree with the neighbor. This is not a permitted use. That's the reason why we were before this board, seeking a use variance. I don't want to go through all of the proofs that Mr. Borden put on at the last meeting, but I do just want to point out that this is a real need in this township. I will tell you, I represent many clients who get violations for parking their vehicles, their commercially used vehicles at their house. I know this board is also familiar with seeing many applications with people coming in to make their business, even though it's just their car, their vehicle that they're parking at their house, but neighbors are complaining or they see 2 trucks or 3 trucks leaving their house. This is a real need. The reason that this applicant's coming in is that they have another site that is a huge success and is very busy. So the fact that we are coming here, we have a unique piece of property, over 7 acres, of which approximately half of it is encumbered that we cannot develop. We put on previously alternatives, and you have the exhibits to show what we can build here. It wouldn't be before this board or before the planning board, permitted uses, and we still believe that this is a less intense use on the property, and that it's better for the entire area. It should be noted, again, I know that we have residential both behind us and to the, is it the north, or to the, I'm sorry, to the west of us, but across the street, there is another totally different zone with warehouses that are much more intense. So you're going to have a hard time finding a piece of property that's situated in this type of an area that has many different uses, and we've tried our best to satisfy, so we don't have much negative impact on the property in that it's a transitional use in the area, and we've given the buffering for the neighbors to make sure that we want to be as good of a neighbor as we can. Also, just to be clear, we are not a 24-hour use. We are 6 to 6, Monday through Saturday. The lighting we've addressed, the noise control, we're complying with all ordinances. We have provided the traffic expert at the last, Mr. Ray, at the last hearing, and he did, I'm pretty sure that if you go back in the testimony, this use is less impactful than if we had built out the office, potential office uses for the site. With that, I just, again, remind the board that because it is a use variance, we do need 5 affirmative votes, and we would ask that the board vote in favor of this application, and I thank you for your time.
Excuse me. Okay, board, it's up to us for discussion.
Yes, I'd like to start. The applicant has revised the plans to positively address the comments from the board and from the public. This applicant had previous sites that were approved by this board, and every one of them has been maintained and operated in accordance with the resolutions passed by this board. Looking at what was presented to us, there appears to be no substantial detriment to the public good, and it does not substantially impair the intent and purpose of the zone plan and the zoning ordinance. Therefore, if there is no further discussion, I would make a motion to approve the application. If there is, I will hold back on the motion.
Any other questions or, I'm sorry, not questions, any other comments from board members? I will speak up at this time. I agree with Dr. Hofstein. I think that they've gone out of their way, in my opinion. I actually applaud you. You know, it's a little over 3 years now, and I applaud you for the multitude of steps you took. Changing the fence to a solid fence, the additional shrubbery and trees to help, you know, work with the neighbor, the definitiveness in the statement of operations. Listen, I understand Mr. Hudak's point about noise and everything, certain hours, but again, that's not something we here can control. That would, you know, be on code enforcement. The area is definitely, you know, a suitable area when you look at what's around it. I understand that it's residential around the area, but this is zone light commercial, and although it's not allowed, if you look at that area, like you pointed out, there's a warehouse across the street, there are other businesses up and down that area, for lack of a better phrase, that I can't come up with a better word right now. So I do think that you've done a good job in trying to work with the neighbor and be accommodating. Nobody wants to be, you know, a bother or a nuisance. And at this point, we can only trust your word that you're going to keep to it. I think the keypad is very helpful because that will allow you to keep track that if, you know, God forbid, someone does something that they're not supposed to do, you have a way to keep record of who was there and at what time. If there are no further comments, I would second Dr. Hofstein's motion, but if there are further comments, please feel free to speak up.
Through the chair.
Yes.
I concur that the applicant has certainly reached deep into this plan and taken a lot of considerations, and I think they've done a good job with it. The fact that they're not allowing for any stacking out on the road of these big rigs, that certainly adds to the safety involved in the area, and they've done, I think, quite a job of trying to keep the noise to a minimum, and they're going to be subject to the code enforcement if it should go above the allowed decibels. I agree. I think it's a good thing.
Any additional comments from board members? All right, I believe we have a motion and a second on the table.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Hofstein made a motion, you know, subject to the other comments of the board. Dr. Hofstein, I presume that you wish that motion to go forward at this time?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And Ms. Bradley, you wish to second that motion at this time?
Yes, I second that.
There you go. You have a motion and a second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Holstein?
Yes.
Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnas? Yes. Ms. Rosal? Yes. Mr. Stafford Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Thank you.
Variance has been granted. Sorry, it didn't come out. I'll try that again. The variance has been granted. Thank you. Motion to adjourn, sorry. Motion to adjourn? Second. Thank you.